Hi, everyone. What you're about to listen to is an interview that I took in person while attending the Crypto Commons Gathering Conference in Austria in August 2021. The conference itself was a wonderful experience where people of a lot of different backgrounds and political ideas were able to discuss openly and safely about how crypto can intersect with fostering the commons. What you'll notice from these interviews is that these differences in thought are sometimes apparent because we all come from different places, and what was honestly refreshing about the experience is that we could do it in a supportive environment. This was probably one of the most receptive audiences in Crypto to Socialism, which was really great for me. Also, a heads up is that you may notice sometimes that the audio was clearly recorded in the house that we were all staying in, which wasn't the best place for recording, but we did the best that we could with what we had. A lot of the interviews will also likely feature in the documentary that I'm making about the world of crypto and its potential futures with a friend. A big reason I was able to make it to this conference was thanks to all the support I received from patrons, so if you find the work that I do important, I hope you'll consider helping out starting at $3 per month on patreon.com/theblockchainsocialist. So we're at the Crypto Commons Gathering, and I have two new guests. One of them is a two-time champion on the podcast, Aleeza Howitt. Well, now's your second time.
I didn't even know that. That's great.
And we have
This
Daniel
guy.
Knobelsdorf. Did I say that right?
No. But for security reasons. No, yeah, Knobelsdorf.
Noble. Okay.
My mom doesn't know how to pronounce it, so it's okay. It's alright.
Cool. So we're going to talk about a bit about Trustlines and some of the experiences of using Trustlines in Venezuela. But maybe just to start, if you guys each can give just a quick introduction of who you are and the projects you guys are working on. And how you guys got to know each other too.
I'm Aleeza Howitt. I'm based in New York, and I am a monetary reformist, a basic income advocate, and I believe that money is a commons, and this kind of guides my work. So that's sort of what brought me into Trustlines, which is a mutual credit system at its heart, or a mutual credit network.
Daniel Knobelsdorf. I'm currently not based anywhere, but usually I'm in Caracas, Venezuela. I usually work across Latin America, so most of my experience is going across the region and engaging from the grassroots level all the way to governments and corporations and startups and social impact companies coming into the region. I had like a guiding quest, let's say. So it's like I'm on a quest to crowd and open source nation states. So I'm very interested in the logic of post nations and how we're gonna scale these models of governance so humanity is sustainably spans across the stars as a multiplanetary species. That's my deal, so yeah. And besides that, I've been helping out with running pilots for Trustlines in Venezuela, which is fun, and I guess we'll go deeper into that.
Yes, we will. You've already given this explanation before on the podcast, but in case people haven't listened to that one, could you explain a bit what Trustlines is?
Sure. Trustlines is, there are many ways to look at it, but to put it simply, it is a peer-to-peer credit network or mutual credit network. So it's a way to, basically it's a way to transact in any circumstances. If you don't have access to a bank account or identity documents to get a bank account or something like that, then you can always use credit with the people that know and trust you. And Trustlines is just a way to formalize and digitize this natural process. And on top of that system of peer-to-peer trust/credit relationships, so on top of that, there's a magical process of multi-hop payments or rippling payments. So this allows you to essentially route credit payments through the network of trusted individuals so that you can end up with the experience of transacting with someone who you don't personally know, who may be out of your trust circle, But you still, in that scenario, would not have, would be able to make a payment using only credit. And so this is kind of, it can be hard to wrap your head around at first, but it's essentially, for someone who not only doesn't have a bank account or access to traditional financial services, it's a more accessible form of money, and it's also a more accessible form of money from the perspective of if you don't have money in the first place. So this can happen in a situation where you, for whatever reason, your economy suffers from a lack of an artificial scarcity of money, and yet people still have resources that they want to trade. So if you can fall back on this natural bottom-up sort of credit system, then you never end up in that situation of artificial scarcity of a medium of exchange. And yeah, you basically can always transact with each other as needed.
And then Trustlines, just to be a little bit more specific, has its own blockchain to facilitate this entire network.
Yes, there is a blockchain, the Trustlines blockchain. It's a minimum viable proof of stake blockchain or sidechain to Ethereum. So it is compatible with EVM smart contracts. And basically the idea behind having our own blockchain was just a practical measure. It needed to, so the idea behind it is that it should live on a censorship-resistant blockchain to have all the security properties that blockchains were created, public blockchains were created to, facilitate. But the reality is that, like the Ethereum main chain has really high gas prices. It's slow sometimes. I don't know. I don't want to trash talk Ethereum right now, but so the Trustlines blockchain is a purpose-driven blockchain to support projects working on financial inclusion, specifically anything having to do with peer-to-peer credit networks. Yeah, it's
that's how it works.
Yes.
So then maybe what would be good then, Daniel, how did you get into contact with Trustlines? Or I guess, what was the situation in Venezuela that made you want to explore the use of Trustlines?
No, I mean, the situation in Venezuela, that's very, if we generalize, of course, the situation in Venezuela, you can think about the hyperinflation, you can think about the subsequent devaluations our currency has had. Like the most recent is the announcement of moving from the sovereign bolivar. I completely dislike the appropriation of words by the government in any context. So that's why the quotes, unquote. So moving from the sovereign bolivar all the way to the digital bolivar. It's not digital, but anyway, there are rumors of what they're going to do with that, let's say, because of the petrocurrency, but I don't really know right now. The whole thing is basically they took out 6 zeros out of the currency, just to make transactions easier to happen in terms of like how people manage accounting and everything like that. But of course, that has some unintended or probably intended consequences on the national economy as a whole. So right now in Venezuela, I don't know when was the last time actually I took money from an ATM. At least in 2 years, I haven't done it. Way before the pandemic, at least 6 months before the pandemic, maybe 1 year before the pandemic, I haven't taken cash out of an ATM in Venezuela. I had bills in my hand, but I don't even know their value anymore. So that kind of scarcity, of course, poses some potential consequences, like the country has been further dollarized. You can go to the supermarket and say like, oh, this cheese is $1.58. And you're like, you feel even better seeing that because it's not like a moving number that maybe when you get to the cashier to pay for it already changed. Because it used to be like that. You had to when you were going to the supermarket, grocery shopping or whatever, you had to be very structured and fast about the timing during the day because you knew the prices changed currently during the day. So the dollarization has taken us forward down the path of, let's say, people are transacting with USD dollars in cash, but they don't have change. There's no change in the country. So you had a $100 bill, $20 bill, etc. It's very difficult to get change. We are highly digitized. Not everybody has a bank account, but we are very, very much highly digitized. We had systems like Venmo, Zelle from the US, and even people using those systems in Venezuela among themselves, if they had a family member or something that holds them, or maybe they had an account themselves. So we had a local system called Pago Móvil that people use to pay digitally. That has saved some hurdles in terms of how people pay. But even so, like, not everybody has a American bank account or access to one. So sometimes you get paid and you had $20 and you had to go. And this has created an emergence of people using IOUs in a very artisanal way. So, you know, very like word of mouth kind of thing. Like, yeah, I trust you, you trust me. You come to the cafeteria every day. So yeah, I'll give you a coffee next time for free, and you just pay for the whatever, for the cake. So those kinds of things like happening very organically, but eventually, you know, it was one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, and people started like printing IOUs, even having like fake US dollar bills with like, you can sign here and you owe this other person how much, etc. So a lot of people, you know, it's not perfect at all. You carry a bunch of paper in your wallet or whatever, or in your house, and you wash your pants, and you're like, I just destroyed $7 of coffee. So that was the basis, and I know Aleeza's work and Trustlines for some time now. So that was the basis of going back to that idea that, okay, we can use this as a means of accounting, and thinking about the complexity that we can add on top with the ripple effects. That was basically the main idea. And just as well, besides money, thinking about like economics around solidarity. Like we had the case of, and maybe I'm going too long on this, but you let me know. We had the case of the power failure that took over the country for like 3-4 days in, when was that? 2019? Anyway, it was terrible. But the thing is, like, some people played the competition game, like, well, not the competition, the scarcity game. Like, I had a power plant, F everyone else. I had my power plant, but then they ran out of fuel. But the people that played collaboratively, you know, you had the power plant, can we connect this to the other house? And then I had some fuel, I had some, you know, some food is gonna go bad, can we share around these things? And oh, I had a fridge that, whatever, a solar panel, we can connect the, you know, people that play collaboratively really made it in that sense, like small communities, like banding up together and say, hey, what do we do with we had a lot of failures with oil services down there. So most buildings and houses, they had wells, and they're usually a shared resource that the community put together. So what do we do about, you know, taking the water out and taking to the old lady in the 9th floor? Oh my God, well, let's do it for her. So, you know, those small economies of solidarity, that's people exchanging a value it's not a 1 = 1. It's like, I help you fix your car because my nephew is gonna come over and he knows how to fix the car. He's gonna, because Señora Jacinta just gave me like 1 kilo of sugar the other day, and let's help Jacinta. She's so awesome. So, you know, those kind of changes, I really want to capture that there. We haven't focused as much there, but it's a really powerful construct in terms of, yeah, how this has happened in some small communities across the country in itself. Sadly, there's no research on that side of the whole thing. We've done a lot in terms of merchants, and we can talk about that. And the other logic that really attracted me into bringing Trustlines to Venezuela was like volunteer networks. People that want to chip in sometime, but maybe they just know this NGO, but it's not about the NGO, it's about the cause, and it's about the skills, matching their skills to particular causes, let's say the SDGs or whatnot. So those are different avenues that we can certainly go, and we will probably explore in the future. Not so far in the future, ideally, but yes.
Nice. So it's coming from a place where in Venezuela, obviously we're having this big issue, and I like your use of the term artisanal IOUs. That's pretty funny. Yes. But yeah, in times when people don't have access to any type of monetary system, they're sort of like forced to figure it out themselves, which is a good thing. But then I guess Trustlines, you thought of it as a way to sort of maybe formalize that structure.
That's the train of thought. Yes, yes.
And how has it gone so far? How have you approached it?
I mean, as I mentioned before, we focus on the path of merchant adoption because of the IOUs, the interest on IOUs. The research that we did, and I don't think we had the numbers. Anyway, the research that we did was, I will say, one of the most detailed research on like potential merchant adoption of these kinds of technologies down in the country. Besides many, well, to be honest, just a small number of one-on-one interviews, but a big number of like reach of getting people to give us their point of view on some particular structures, like had you lost an IOU, would you prefer X? Do you feel safe about using this kind of tool, like in your phone for accounting? What happens if there's, of course, it's a complex situation down there in terms, like, of course there's problems of security. So how does that fare into the potential adoption? But basically, yeah, I mean, it's been interesting, but it's been very, very difficult just to kind of train the trainers and get people on board in that sense. The problem is there. Everything says like, the problem is there. They're open to a solution. They really want to tap into this, but the adoption of the tool is something we're working on and iterating very hard right now. And some fun things may come in the near future. So yes.
Yeah, just historically, like mutual credit systems have been successful in times of economic distress, like very similar to what Venezuela is going through right now. So, for example, the Via Bank in Switzerland, it emerged in the 30s, and it was very successful at that point, still running today. And there's a similar project in Sardinia in Italy that came out after the 2008 crisis. And another one there was a multilateral clearing system that had a lot of activity in Slovenia in the 90s. And as well, what else is there? Oh, and in Argentina, there's a really big, the red de truque.
La red de truque.
That was really big
I'll translate.
In the late 90s and early 2000s. And that one's very interesting because part of the reason why it ended up, there's a lot of activity in that mutual credit system, basically, community currencies, I guess what you want to call it. But then part of the reason why they struggled was because of accountability issues. And this is something that Trustlines, if you use Trustlines, then it's sort of implicitly a solution to that because all of the credit relationships are bilateral and it's all, well documented. And
I mean, like, for example, in Venezuela, we had a number of cooperatives that basically feed the country. Basically, the people eat in Venezuela, at least thinking about, agriculture. Thinking about agriculture in Venezuela, basically cooperatives are feeding the country. And it's been like that historically, but it's very difficult to tap into that space, at least into the biggest node in terms of cooperatives in Venezuela. It's very nearby the Colombian border. It's very... it's when you map stakeholders, you have to think about Colombia, paramilitary and guerrilla. You have to think about like government officials coming over and saying, hey, I want 5% of that. You have to think about so many things in that sense. And even sometimes there's stories of the military tapping into the cooperatives themselves and saying like, this is my land, continue doing what you're doing, but this is my land now. And you just give me a... So it's kind of difficult to get to that. And the other issue will be like connectivity. Down in those places is not exactly the best because we're talking about the Andean region of the country, which is what fits the country basically, has the best conditions for that, and it's really difficult in that sense. So that's why we haven't really tried to tap into that source, even if we know it's there. So we map certain potential other pathways for, let's say, pilots besides the focus on merchants. Just making a small parenthesis on the focus on merchants. The main reason we went down that path is that there is in place a very strong and beautiful relationship with a network of 2,600 merchants in Venezuela that they started to naturally sell goods and services over WhatsApp, because that's the king of messaging apps in the country. So basically that's why we went that way, but we do have a map thinking about what I was mentioning before, like volunteer networks, co-working spaces, or like entrepreneurs sharing resources, because when you are going down that path, resources are scarce, even just knowledge, not necessarily access to capital is what I mean. Just as well, like time banking in different aspects, in other aspects beside this, and tapping into food production cooperatives. But yes, it's there. It's kind of waiting for us that we reshuffle resources a little bit and finish up, wrapping up like how the current pilot with the merchants is going, and we may do some experiments in that sense.
What I find interesting what you said, Aleeza, is that a lot of these projects end up staying even after the financial distress.
Yeah, some of them do, yeah. Yeah, so it could be, that's why, like, within Trustlines, you could look at it as a complementary system, but you could also look at it as an alternative monetary system in itself. And you could, it's a bottom-up money system. That's what I say sometimes.
But that's been like such a big theme at this conference.
Yeah.
Like just trying to create some sort of alternative system that can scale and can get away from the shitty parts.
Yeah. But the thing about Trustlines is it's nothing new, right? It's like already, I mean, like one of the crazy things, at least for me, that came out of what they did was, like, I didn't know that people were issuing their own IOUs. Artisanal IOUs.
Freshly baked.
And like they sent like some pictures of them, and this.
I should have brought a couple.
But this one, some of them look like dollars. So yeah, people are printing their own money because they need to, and and so that it's also they're already familiar with the idea of an IOU, which or a pagaré.
Pagaré? Yeah, pagaré, yeah. A vale, pagaré.
But this is one of the hurdles, like with Trustlines, sometimes people I talk to, it's already an issue to explain what an IOU is or what a personal voucher is. Right. But like even if someone maybe, and that's part of what the research they did on there was showing, is like some people may recognize the term, some people may not, but people know what it looks like, and because they
yeah, it's part of the construct.
Yeah, due to the conditions in Venezuela at the moment, is that they already have exposure to this concept of kind of mutual credit.
Yes.
That's in the West, I think it's much more difficult to wrap your head around if you've always relied on, the euro or the US dollar or something.
Yeah, nobody's doing their savings in bolivars, trust me.
Do you guys want to talk about the paper that you guys are working on and like some of the lessons learned so far? I know it's still a work in progress, but
yeah. So the idea was I think there was a call for papers about blockchain for good, and so this was sort of the inspiration of putting some of the research into
a more structured form to be shared to other people.
And also the SDGs. So our focus is on SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, from the UN, number 8, which is largely about economic growth, and specifically target 8.10. It's about building better access to financial institutions. And so my interpretation is that, like, you know, many blockchain initiatives focus on building accessible technology rather than accessible financial structures. So in my opinion, Trustlines is an accessible financial structure because, you know, you don't need money to use Trustlines. And that's kind of the crazy thing about it. You just need credit from your community, and then you're in the system. So it goes even beyond identity documents or a bank account. It's like, you know, if you don't have money itself, you can still use Trustlines as a medium of exchange. Yeah. And so this is like a whole next level.
Which is like different, like whenever like some other people talk about cryptocurrencies being like accessible, one of the parts that's missing is whether or not they have money to access it. Or to pay for it.
That's an issue.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's kind of why, you know, Trustlines came from I'd say it came from the people that it came from, because Trustlines it's really an implementation of an older idea. It was originally called Ripple Pay. It's now renamed to Rumble Pay, a defunct project. But so it's basically that project, which predates Bitcoin, but implemented on a blockchain for the security properties. That's what Trustlines is. It's not really a new idea. It's just a combination of ideas, and it came out of the Ethereum community because they were struggling with this issue of how do you actually get people to, you know, the onboarding process for using cryptocurrencies is so excessively centralized. Defeats the purpose. And it's hilarious actually. But Trustlines is their, I could say Trustlines was like their answer to that problem. But from another perspective, it's the mutual credit, like the beautiful idea of mutual credit just made like super secure.
Super secure.
And super scalable too.
That's great. I didn't know some of these things. So
We're all learning here.
Nice.
So now I have to ask you guys, because I ask this everyone, but what do the crypto commons mean to you?
Family. Yeah. You guys are there in my book, you know. It's nice. Sorry.
I don't have anything that cheesy.
Oh.
But I really hope that the term crypto commons takes off, because I find myself so often having to say, no, it's not. I'm not like I'm not speculating on Bitcoin. That's not what I do with my time. I'm working on very radical solutions for a new reality of, it's trying to communicate that you work in crypto or with blockchain technology, decentralized technology, using this term, trying to communicate that you work on this stuff for like the commons.
Yeah.
It's so difficult because you know, the finance bros and like the speculators have just taken over the entire.
Yeah, I want to build on top of that.
Go for it.
Say something. I mean, like it's beautiful, but in a sense, it's the niche. It's such a niche kind of thing. Like we had very little people coming from like projects in the field besides blockchain, and you know, and that's kind of something that I'm like, yeah, I can talk blockchain and crypto with you and DeFi and whatever, but it's like, dude, being like in the field, working with the grassroots in very complex situations across like the world, whatever. Like, I mean, I come from like other technologies. I helped co-found an augmented reality startup at one point, launch a civic innovation lab for non-violent protests, etc., 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 etc. And those kinds of things, like, I mean, like, I certainly want to see, like, eventually, and we had a good start, anyhow. But we had a more meshy distributed kind of thing with other bridges to different communities, because these are the people we are building for. So I won't mind like putting down some money for a scholarship to bring somebody from X project from, well, let's say a country that everybody says that's not my country, Kenya. So something like that down here, and say like, tell us your story. Like what's going on down there, in the sense from the maybe not well-rooted perspective, grassroots economics, but like the user perspective. Like, how is it for you when you adopted this system, and the way that it changed your everyday life and your relationships of transacting value? Those are things that I really want to know, besides systems design, which is beautiful and amazing, one of the main reasons I'm here. But that's like one track. So the humans that are living in those systems, I really want to see them represented in this kind of space. As I said, we had an amazing start for this, and I can be cheesy about it, such amazingness that I can be cheesy and say family. But yeah, I mean, besides that, this is something I want to do, a pool, and build towards. So, yeah.
Nice. But thanks a lot for taking the time to speak about your experience with Trustlines and using it, and sharing us the history of mutual credit. I think it's really interesting. Maybe just to finish, if you guys want to leave or where people can keep up with you and your work.
Online.
Yeah, I never prepared for that. Like,
Twitter profile.
I have a Twitter.
Yeah.
My Twitter name is Aleeza Grox. Grox is not my last name, just to clarify. Trustlines also has Twitter. There's a Telegram group. There's a forum. There's everything to follow Trustlines.
No, yeah, basically, thinking about the context in Venezuela, it's easier to find. We are represented in Trustlines. Venezuela in Instagram is what people use down there. So Trustlines.b, the tiny one, E, and basically you can find us there. Besides that, I'm basically everywhere as Knobs, KNOBS, DAO. Yeah. Another cheesy buzzword on my handle. Yeah, I know. Well, anyway, I need to define in that sense.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, and see you guys later.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Grab some wine.